All right, everyone, let's get started. Thank you. Thank you for joining us at this event. My name is Wenbo. I'll be doing the introduction. So thank you for joining for our hardware entrepreneurship events, Insights from Successful Hardware. This is hosted by IEEE Silicon Valley Startup Special Interest Group. So to give you a brief glance about IEEE, IEEE stands for the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and we're the largest global professional organization with 423 members across the world. In the Bay Area, the Santa Clara Valley section is actually the largest section in the world, and we have more than 30 different technical societies. IEEE is primarily a technical and professional development organization, and we have conferences, publications, as well as events throughout the world. In particular, IEEE leads as the most cited publisher in new patents across all publishing organizations. And for those who work in, regardless if you work in semiconductor, robotics, or computer engineering, I'm sure IEEE conference is also one of the leading conference in your respective field. So a little bit about IEEE Young Professionals. IEEE Young Professional is for those who graduated within the last 15 years, and we host happy hour, hiking, and volunteering events as part of our array of social events. We also hold a variety of technical events, including talks on hardware, robotics, and AI. And lastly, IEEE Young Professionals also have major events, also have YP events at major conferences, such as the ISCC, TAMS, and the GHTC. So if you're interested in joining IEEE Young Professionals, please follow us at the site below. And some of our upcoming events include a robotics talk in conjunction with the American Society of Mechanical Engineers and Silicon Valley Robotics. So again, please follow up our meetup page at meetup.com/SCV. So a little bit about the IEEE Silicon Valley Startup Special Interest Group. This is a new special interest group formed within IEEE Santa Clara Valley late last year. And our mission is to provide opportunities to network, learn, and share experience in startup entrepreneurship by leveraging the IEEE network. And in addition to this event, which is actually our first event of the year, some of our future events in the pipeline, including entrepreneurship development seminars, a startup pitch competition, as well as more events in collaboration with other leading financial and corporate VCs. We encourage you to subscribe to our mailing list at the link below. So it's my pleasure to introduce you today of our moderator, Joseph Wei. Joseph is the founder of Technology Ventures Group, which is an advisory firm for startups and corporate innovations. Prior to TVG, Joseph worked as a venture partner of SkyChee Ventures and a founding partner of 360 Hardware Incubator. I also know Joseph personally through his involvement with IEEE. He's currently the chair of IEEE Startup Special Interest Group, which is the host of this event. Joseph is also the previous chair of IEEE Santa Clara Valley section, as well as has involvement in a variety of different events. I've known Joseph personally for many years, and it's my pleasure to welcome him as our moderator for the event. Joseph, the floor is yours.
Okay. So you want me to pull up the speaker introductions, right? Or you want to just continue?
Joseph,
okay.
Would you like to introduce our speakers?
Okay, hang on. Okay, can you see my slides? Okay. So we have three very experienced and luminary speaker for this panel that cover a lot of the different aspects for chips development all the way to consumer electronics devices to medical devices. Dr. Peterson has co-founded 6 successful companies in MEMS technology. The first one was,
you're showing
hello?
slides? I can see your slides. Are you showing screen?
Yeah, hang on. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I forgot to hit the share screen button. So Dr. Peterson has co-founded 6 successful companies in MEMS technology, and the first one was Transsensory Devices in 1982, Nova Sensor in 1985 that was acquired by GE, Cephet in 1996, which is a publicly traded company, and also recently have been received approval from FDA for their COVID-19 test kits. SiTime in 2004, acquired by Megachips, and Profusa in 2008, is still a private company in the health sensing area, and Varian in 2009, acquired by Qualcomm. So Kretner met back, I think, in 2014, and he's a great, he's also head of the Band Angel Hardware Special Interest Group, and he's also received the IEEE Medal Honor in 2019. Next speaker is Pete Rodriguez. Pete is the CEO of Silicon Catalyst. Pete has over 35 years experience in semiconductor industry, and that's, Silicon Valley was coined back in 1977 because of the number of semiconductor companies. Pete's currently on the board, HISA, advisory board of Alpha Core, Harvard Management Partners, and observer of boards of Mentium Technology, Esprit Technologies, and Owl AI. Pete was formerly Vice President and General Manager of Interface and Power Group at NXP Semiconductors. Prior to NXP, Pete was the CEO of EXA Corporation. I think it's based in Fremont. And CEO of Expedion Design System, Chief Marketing Officer at Virage Logic, and Major Account Manager at LSI Logic, and Program Manager at Aerojet Electronic System. He spent 12 years as an entrepreneur with 3 different startups and raised over $30 million in venture capital. And Silicon Catalyst actually is the only accelerator that focuses on helping startups in doing semiconductors. And Sridhar Solur is the general manager of Berkshire Grey. It's a company that has already raised $263 million in Series B to make robots that operate flexible swarms to automate warehouses. Previously, Sri headed up consumer product at Shock Ninja, which we have noticed a lot of the product on TV being advertised at the time, and Comcast Digital Home. And he also founded HP's wearable and IoT business. So thank you very much for all the speakers joining this panel. And okay, then. Oops, let me pull up the. So just to kick off the discussion, I recently gave a talk about market trends in hardware to Okay. I see 4 major technology trends: artificial intelligence, machine learning, MEMS and sensors, wireless communication, and power energy. There are a lot more other technologies that are very important in the upcoming years, but I focus on these 4 because I think the impact will be a little bit more obvious.
Hi, Joseph. Sorry for the interruption. Are you sharing slides? I can see you. We can see your slides.
A second. I thought I shared my slide. No? Here we go. Oh, you disable my sharing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Which one is you? How about now?
Yep. So 4 technology areas: artificial intelligence, MEMS and sensors, wireless communication, and power energy. Okay, so a lot of the artificial intelligence and machine learning have been talked about is mainly in the software, but hardware is also a very key part to making sure that the software that runs on these algorithms can be run in the most efficient and the fastest performance. So MEMS and sensor, I think that's where the expertise of Kurt comes in. So we continue strengthening of the MEMS and sensor and adding capability of the different type of sensors that allow us to have autonomous car, healthcare monitoring. So these all require hardware, not just pure software. And then wireless communication, obviously right now we're talking a lot about 5G, but there's also Bluetooth 5.1, Wi-Fi 6, and also a bunch of lower data bits and lower power consumption wireless technology, such as LoRa, Sigfox, and BIoT and LTE-M. So in terms of power and energy, I think it started out with the both on the lower power energy side for wearable IoT devices, as well as for the solar energy for renewable energy, and also now there's talk about wireless charging for power. So these are the what I see is the combination of these devices will actually enable a lot of solutions along with the software for smart cities, smart factories, healthcare, and other type of applications. So, so that's kind of an introduction to the topic that we have about hardware entrepreneurship. So for now, I'd like to bring up Pete Rodriguez to talk a little bit about his perspective in the hardware and also how Silicon Catalyst helps startup entrepreneurs. So Pete, you want to, Wendell, you want to. Oh, wait a second. I stopped sharing. So Wendell, you have to allow Pete to present then.
Thank you, Joseph. I'm ready, but okay, it's working now. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I will go in 5 or 6 minutes through what is typically a 30-minute overview. I will skip some slides and I'll quickly touch the main points. So Silicon Catalyst is the only incubator in the world that's 100% focused on semiconductor startups. So thank you for allowing me to be here and let you know a little bit of what we're doing. So, okay, now it's working. So we all know, if we've been in the industry, that we went through 10 to 15 years of a tremendous amount of consolidation at the public company level, with lots of mega companies being created, like Broadcom, NXP, et cetera. We also went through many years of a great reduction in venture capital as the venture capitalists moved into software and other areas and away from hardware, and specifically semiconductors. So against this backdrop, our 3 founders started Silicon Catalyst back in 2015. And because our #1 goal is to have fun, they started with a big party. So we had about 700 folks at Avaya. I wasn't part of the team. I joined because I heard there was going to be free food and free booze. So it was the kickoff event for the soccer stadium in San Jose. So today we know that chips are really roaring back. There's a lot, as Joseph mentioned in his presentation, there's just a lot of high energy activity. A lot of companies are getting funded. It is a very exciting time to be in the semiconductor industry. However, it's still hard to raise money. So Silicon Catalyst, we've mentioned, we focus on solutions. So this is chip plus sensor, chip plus software, chip plus system. We are really expanding heavily in MEMS. And Dr. Peterson, who's on the panel, is one of our luminary advisors on the team. So good to see you here, Kurt. We also have extended now to any type of semiconductor solution, and we've extended to intellectual property that goes into these semiconductor solutions. So what do startups struggle with? We did lots of surveys, and obviously we talked with the over 300 companies that have applied in the last 5 years. And the things that cause the entrepreneur trouble are, it takes a lot of time to get started, takes a lot of money to get started, and then they have to spend that money on EDA tools to design the product, on MPWs or shuttles to build the prototypes, and all type of test equipment and test programs in order to get it validated. These are the top challenges today. And it really is difficult to raise money for a chip startup with PowerPoint. Clearly, if you're doing a software startup, I recently visited Berkeley Skydeck, you see a lot of young people with PCs and C compilers that can get a prototype done for very little money. In the hardware space, that is a real challenge. So what does Silicon Catalyst provide? Silicon Catalyst provides an expert advisor from our team with the entire team and advisor network backing them up. We provide each company several $1 million of goods and services, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Connections to amazing advisors, investors, angels. Our companies have had a tremendous success getting funded. Our strategic partners and other potential acquirers. We also have a lot of events. We did 31 events in the world last year. Our target was to do 36 this year, but COVID has slowed that down significantly. However, we've moved online and have had quite a bit of success with events. Okay, my clicker is stopped working. Oh, here we go. So our value proposition is fairly simple. Instead of spending a lot of time trying to get several $1 million to be able to build a prototype, we provide most of these things for free so that with a little bit of money, you can get to a prototype. And now with a prototype in hand, you have validated what you're trying to do and can go raise actual money from real VCs. Okay. In exchange, we take some common equity. So we're on the same boat as the entrepreneur for incubation. Okay, what is our ecosystem built? I won't go into a great amount of detail, but we have amazing strategic partners that get very involved with the startups. And we recently announced that we added ARM and STMicro to our growing list of strategic partners. And our first two partners to be both strategic and in-kind. ARM provides a free intellectual property to our companies, and ST is providing the best foundry for MEMS in the world to selective companies in our portfolio. Okay, we've expanded, we work with other accelerators. We have a joint venture in Chengdu, China for companies that apply from China. We have local operations in Israel, and now we're working with around 25 leading universities. Stanford was clearly the first and the one we've done the most with. Berkeley would be second, but we now are working with Imperial College of London, schools on the East Coast, Cornell, etc., and universities in both China and India. Okay. Less than a year ago, we founded the Silicon Catalyst Angels, an angel group that is made of the ecosystem, and it's already made 5 significant investments, and it also works fairly closely with Sandhill Angels and Band of Angels, of which Kurt is a member of. So our strategic partners, we'll go very quickly through this slide. They participate in all of that we do, including early access to the raw pipeline and help select the companies that go into the incubator. So what is an in-kind partner? An in-kind partner is a leading company that provides, it's a group of leading companies that provide hundreds of millions of dollars that we can then distribute to our startups. And who do we have as in-kind partners? It's really weird. My clicker stops working. Let's see, fourth time is a charm. Here we go. So on the design side, you can see that all of our partners are tier 1s. Our companies can get free design tools from Synopsys for 2 full years. almost an unlimited number of licenses for every tool that they have so that they can complete the design and go to silicon. They can leverage the IP from all of these companies here, design services. And then our primary foundry is the world's #1 foundry, TSMC, which provides free MPW shuttles to all of our startups at any production process technology node. So we get shuttles for our startups for free on down to 7 nanometer. Okay, and then you see that we have significant expertise on the back end, packaging, testing, et cetera. And we've added a lot of companies to the business side, from cloud to legal to patent, et cetera, software, finance. There's 2 companies that have been added. We have not announced them yet. They'll be announced in the July timeframe. Okay. Okay, so the majority of our applicants are serial entrepreneurs. We have 6 or 7 spin-outs out of universities. We have 1 spin-out out of industry. We've reviewed, I think if you look at it worldwide, it's over 450 companies. We've admitted 31, 30 have been announced into the US incubator, and 12 have been accepted into the China incubator. It's a minimum 2-year of incubation. Okay. We do a lot of great events, 31 last year. The bottom is the attendees. Our marquee event, which we just held online last week on Zoom, is our portfolio company update. Other accelerators call it their demo day. And this was at TSMC last November with about 150 attendees and who's who in the semiconductor industry. And my clicker's not working. I think I've covered enough. We do a lot of other things. I was going to walk you through some of our companies, but anyway, we have companies from RF to AI to IP to power. So it's all over to medical. So it's all over the map. We have a few MEMS, a few photonics companies too. So that's a quick overview of Silicon Catalyst. We're here to help startups. All of our team has a combined 400 years of experience in the semiconductor industry and a wonderful network of advisors. So I'll stop with that since my clicker's no longer working.
So thank you, Pete. And for the audience, feel free to submit questions through the chat room, and we'll have Q&A after all the speakers. So the next speaker up is Kurt Peterson. So please go ahead, and Wimbo, can you get Kurt the share screen privilege? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, I can see a slide.
I'm not sure how to increase the size of this, but so Joseph asked me to, say a few words about what I've done in the past and sort of fold that in with insights. So what I decided to do is just go through some of my companies and sort of lessons learned at these various companies. So, so I founded 6 companies, TDI, Novasensor, Cepheid, SciTime, Varion, and Profusa. And so I'll go through several of these, sort of what I learned. The very first company was in 1982, so it's quite some time ago. TDI, we never got into production. We only did R&D projects for other companies. And our team had no experience in production or operations. So one of the lessons I learned there was the most important team members, and a lot of entrepreneurs sort of don't ignore this, but the #1 team member are operations people and production people. So, really put a high degree of focus on those kind of people. I'm gonna try something. Okay, so at Novasensor, started in 1985, we were in production within 6 months. So I took that lesson very seriously about operations people. And our first product was actually a second source. So we were supplying a pressure sensor chip that was already being supplied by another competitor. And it wasn't a home run product. And I think that's another thing that entrepreneurs tend to look at, is they try to go for the home run right away instead of a base hit. But we built our product much better than the competition, and pretty soon we became the first source for that product, and that allowed Novacenter to take off. So the lesson I learned there was get into production as soon as possible, even if it's not your home run product, but it's just a base hit product. So today, Novacenter is still around after 35 years. I think they sell something like $50 million a year in pressure sensors. Cepheid, so I started Cepheid in 1997. Cepheid is a diagnostics company for doing what they call molecular diagnostics, or looking for molecules in fluids to diagnose an illness. But our first product was a research use only, because a full diagnostic product requires FDA approval. All of that takes years and years. And again, getting into production as soon as possible, we started off with a research use only product first. And we got that into production within 2.5 years of founding the company. For the diagnostics product, I chose been there, done that, experienced medical device development engineers for the diagnostics product. It took the diagnostics product over 8 years to get to the market. But one of the reasons I chose, again, these very experienced medical device development engineers who had already brought medical products to the market was because, again, it's those operations people, those people who have experience in getting products into production. And they are still at the company after, over 30 years and are still doing a great job there. And so the lesson here I learned is that all of you, this is a seminar on hardware. Hardware, and especially diagnostics, take a long time. It's just part of the nature of it. And I'll mention a little bit more about that at SciTime, the next one. But today, Cepheid is the world leader in molecular diagnostics. They were acquired about 3 years ago for $4 billion. At SciTime in 2004, we were defying the huge quartz crystal industry. We were using MEMS to make to replace the quartz crystal oscillator. And we got into production relatively quickly. Again, we had experienced people. We wanted to get into production quickly. We did that. But the entrenched competition, the entrenched incumbents fought tooth and nail. The quartz crystal industry is a $6 billion industry, and they lowered their prices. They put all kinds of roadblocks in the way. And again, it took over 10 years for the company to get into a break-even situation. But they did that, and they did an IPO last November, and I think they have a market cap now of something like $600 million. So the lesson I learned here was never underestimate your competition. And I'm going to talk a little bit more broadly about some of these issues in the next last slide. So today, SciTime is successfully attacking the quartz crystal industry. They're shipping hundreds of millions of oscillators per year. At Varian in 2008, we designed the company to be acquired by Qualcomm within 2 years. So we just said we want to be acquired by Qualcomm. We had a great technical team. We put a great IP base together. We talked with Qualcomm for quite a long period of time and met with them and listened to what they had to say. And we were acquired in less than 2 years. So we were successful doing that. And the lesson here is, and every startup needs to do this, is to actively plan for your exit from the very beginning. That's really critical, and investors and especially angel investors will ask you about that. And today, for Varian, 4 out of the 7 Varian team members still work at Qualcomm. So today, as a co-chair of the HardTech Group at the Band of Angels, this is just some of the things that we look for. We look for an excellent team to be in place, and that's kind of what I've emphasized here. Operations people, people who are experienced bringing products to the marketplace, not just developing products. quality people, people who can put a supply chain together. So we were looking for an excellent, well-rounded team to be in place. We also look for discussions with strategic partners should be ongoing. We like it when startup companies are already talking to potential acquirers or potential customers, and they're already interacting with them and seeing what kind of products those strategic partners would like to see. We like to see a supply chain in place, because again, you know, this whole operations supply chain is an area that is often ignored by or is not put enough attention on by entrepreneurs. So we look for the supply chain to be in place. We look for prototypes. You know, you have to have a prototype. You have to have IP, already filed IP. And you should have a clear understanding of the competition, of who your competition is, why you're better than the competition, how you can succeed where the competition can't. And you need to have a list of potential acquirers. And even today with the coronavirus situation, angel investing has slowed down a little bit, but is not at all stopped. You know, our group has just invested in 3 companies within the last 2 months. So it's still very active, and I encourage you to come if you have a hardware to contact me, and you can present in front of our HardTech group. And by the way, having an association, one of the things we highly value is having an association with Silicon Catalyst. So companies that are talking with Silicon Catalyst are very high on our list of good companies. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kurt, for your insights and about the looking for potential acquirer, and because in the hardware space, actually, recently, I mean, there are always Fitbit and Garmin, and also GoPro went IPO, but a lot of the, you know, the successful exit like Ring and Nest thermostat are actually acquisition targets. So next, I'd like to bring up Sridhar Solur. So Sri has a very interesting background where he's both on the consumer electronics side with Sharp Ninja, and also experience from the corporate side with HP, starting at the HP Wearable Group, and now also his company successfully raised over $200 million in funding for his factory robots. So Sri, please take the floor.
Thank you. Hopefully you can see my screen, and I'm quickly going to go into a slideshow mode. All right. Quick intro. I've built products, both consumer, B2C, and B2B, both software and hardware. Just from my past lives, I've been associated with products like Alta Vista on one side, worked at Digital, built large networks using digital networking products, built what's called the instantiation of printing from your mobile today, Cloud Print, HPE Print, wherein, you know, when in 2015 there were like 45 million printers connected to the web. So think of this as SaaS and scaling and IoT. And then went on to build, you know, smartwatches. I have to say, a very brutal industry, walked the streets of Shenzhen, but then learned this amazing trick where you can have the same backend platform, the same hardware platform, but you get technology to speak different brand languages. Think of it this way. You could actually have the same backend, the same hardware, and you could have a Hugo Boss watch, which looks massively different from a Juicy Couture or a Ferrari or a Coach watch. So trying to get technology and similar hardware to speak different brand languages was one of the key learnings. I spent some time with Comcast focusing on bringing digital and physical products together. And we'll talk a little bit about this, because in the new era, when you build a finished product, in the current era, it's not just a physical product, but the digital component gives the physical product a conscience. And then bringing those two together is a little bit of science, a little bit of art, but there are lots of insights, and I hope to share those insights. And of course, the last 2+ years, I've built robots. Think of it this way, right? You have an appliance, then you have a consumer electronics product, that's the next in the continuum. Then you have an IoT product, that means the product has both a digital twin, a physical product has a digital twin in the cloud, and there's an app and things like that. And then you have IoT that moves, which is robotics. And it is so extraordinarily complex, the world of robotics. But in the last 2 years, I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I've had. And having built consumer robots, now I'm working and on building industrial robots. So that's a summary of some of the work that I've done. In my previous job, I was a chief product officer at Shark Ninja. Go look up the Shark IQ robot. That's my baby. And if you want to look at some of the other products, take a look at some of the smartwatches from Coach, Ferrari, Movado, etc. But with that said, I want to touch upon where we are, why hardware is so important today in the world of products. And very simple. And I'm going to illustrate this in, very quickly. Think of it this way. The era of internet was, in the year around 2000. And the three enabling technologies was like, content was pushed to the web, e-commerce took off, and then, of course, broadband took off. So with all of that coming together, we had like 300 million devices connected to the internet around year 2000. Very interesting. But year 2000 was also a time, 2001, where we had a recession. So what I'm trying to highlight is in and around times of economic recession, you've seen connectivity to the internet just taking off. 8 years later, we're talking about 2008. We had another recession that was happening, but then you see this 10x multiplier where you went from 300 million devices to 3 billion devices connected to the internet. And look at what happened in the world of silicon. During the first era, the year 2000, most of the chipsets, this was all Intel and Microsoft. You come into this era, it's all ARM, Apple, and Android, iOS and Android. And then there is a 10x multiplier between the two, right? And of course, you're talking about another recession, that happened there. And the three technologies that took off are like, mobile, social, and cloud. So it's really interesting. Now we are in a different era. And of course, all of us are looking at what's happened to our economy around the world. And you're looking at another 10x that's between the era of mobile and where we are right now. And what is really interesting in this 10x interaction that has happened here connected to the internet? This era was the era of glass slabs. And the new era that we are in, we are talking about hardware. This is the era of enchanted objects. So building different kinds of hardware and giving it a digital conscience is where we are. And what is also really interesting is we went from everything being prominent in the cloud to you're seeing a lot of intelligence being pushed to the edge. So if you are in the world of hardware right now, I really think we are in the era of opportunity. And the technologies that are basically driving this is, of course, robotics, machine intelligence, and I call this ambient interfaces. This could be haptics. And you can see that this era is transforming multiple industries, whether it's working from home, whether it's travel, transportation, and hospitality, whether it's education, whether it's bioinformatics. Hardware right now with the software in the cloud is going to rule the world. With that said, I just also want to highlight a few things. As you build products, you're bringing digital and physical together. And I want to highlight, when you bring digital and physical together, there are a few things that happens. Digital amplifies the perceived value of the physical device. And then digital also gives you a lot of leeway to control user experiences. And we are moving from a world where, remember the last era where you had mobile, cloud, and social, wherein you were talking of people to people communicating with each other. We are moving to a world where we are communicating with people to machines. So especially if you're building hardware, I'm talking about building these machines, you have to understand the man-machine interaction has to be like, very smooth, if you will. And we are also moving from a world where we're going from an asset-heavy world to an access-heavy world. So the summary is, we are basically moving to a new era. Having said that, I want us to get the basics right. Having brought both consumer products to market, and these are consumer connected products, like home security, home automation, robots, and wearables. I think we need to get the basics right. And I've seen a bunch of hardware startups. I sit on advisory boards, and I know where they fail. Very simple. Just get back to the basics. Have a stage gate process. Understand your concepts. When you build prototypes, understand your P-builds, very important. Make sure once you have your P-builds, you're going to be spending a lot of money on tooling, around this place. And we'll talk a little bit about, how do you pick your contract manufacturer versus a tier 1, tier 2, or a tier 3 factory. But you need to make sure that you validate in the prototype stage two things. One, will your product have high consumer satisfaction? And 99% of the times, the founder of the company and everybody around, they are in an echo chamber. What you want to listen to is your consumers and customers. Listen to them, put the prototype in front of them, do observational studies, you do user testing, do CSIs, learn. And before you spend a lot of money on tooling, make sure that your product will have high consumer satisfaction. But that alone is not enough. You need to make sure that your product will have a high rate of sale. There are many tricks to making that happen, but you have to do that before the tooling stage. And then, once you finish tooling, you're going to have a bunch of engineering builds. And let me tell you something here. During this process, you may have to go back and modify a few tools. It doesn't matter. You should have no religion about abandoning your product in this stage if you think the product is not going to be successful. And then, you have mass production, but then think about it this way. It's about software and hardware coming together. When your product actually ships from a factory, your software is not complete. Your software basically lags hardware by a couple of weeks or by a month. So many a times when the hardware is in people's homes, that's when you're actually going to be complete with both software and hardware coming together. Have the right checks and balances within your company. I think Pete highlighted this, or I think Kurt highlighted this. The most important people are the people who know how to manufacture and productize. Super important. You may have the most brilliant set of engineers and PhDs. Trust me, it's not. For you to build a successful business, you need to understand productization. And product management team has to be the connectors. they need to basically push engineering on one side. They need to be able to give micro KPIs to engineers, and engineers should just focus on hitting the bullseye, the micro KPIs. The KPIs that the product team basically gives engineering has to be validated by customer insights, because those KPIs has to be consumer relevant, right? So the product guys are kept, the checks and balances on the product team is kept by the consumer insights team. And marketing, the way you speak about the product, even that has to go through, consumer insights. So if your product is going to be on a shelf on a retailer, or it's sold through Amazon, for example, how does the product look online and offline? And try and get all those inputs, because at the end of the day, you need to have a high rate of sale. And of course, finance, you have to make money. If your gross margins are not in greater than 40 or closer to 50%, you're not really actually going to be making any money after giving retailers their cut in a consumer product. Align the sprints. It is super hard. Software always lags hardware, and aligning those sprints, for those of you who have worked on hardware products, I can easily say, by the time you come to mass production, you may have 3 or 4 optimizations on the hardware product, but on software, look at your Jira backlog. You will have 500, 600 on the Jira backlog. For people who have not been exposed deeply into the world of software, they're going to look at you and say, you know what, you really don't understand. So you need to be able to bring both hardware and software together. Don't forget the geopolitical and the pandemic implications. We are talking about manufacturing in China, but let me tell you, I have seen the nightmare in the last couple of years of trying to move manufacturing outside of China. And it is excruciatingly hard. If you're in hardware, think about moving tools. How hard is it? And the adjustment right now in the world of COVID is bizarre. If you need anything to be tested, a prototype to be tested at a factory, you have to take the prototype, and someone cannot take it inside the factory. All the testing has to happen at the gate. So think of multiple DMZs, or demilitarized zones, for COVID. Factor that into consideration, because this is not going away. Other learnings: contract manufacturing versus factory direct. Guys, you work with a CM, you must have a lot of money with you. Many a times it's easier to go directly to a factory, but remember, you have to focus insane on the quality of the product. You go with a CM, you can take quality to a certain extent for granted, because it comes as a part of the package. But if you don't have that kind of money, you can go directly to tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 factories. Cost, really important. Cost and other aspects that drive cost. To give you an example, NRE. NRE is a big amount. I would recommend the tricks of the trade is to amortize that across the volume of the products that you're going to create. And IP and legal actions. In the last 3 products that I've brought to market, I can tell you the hardware products, the rite of passage, especially if there are incumbents, the rite of passage is a cease and desist by your competitor. You are going to get, at least in my case, you are going to get, a cease and desist order. There will be an injunction of sorts. So be very careful about how you handle IP from day one. And mechanical, hardware, and software engineering teams are kind of like diametrically opposite. You should work to bring them together, because there are times when software takes care of the hardware shortcomings. Sometimes hardware takes care of the software shortcomings. And that balance of getting those two together is going to be not easy. So you need to make sure that you have a chief architect who can look at both sides, hardware and software, and bringing that together. So in summary, look, we are in a golden era, right? We are in the era of enchanted objects, wherein we are going from 3 billion devices connected to the internet in 2008, towards 30 billion enchanted objects being connected to the internet. But remember, it's the world of digital and physical coming together, and digital gives the conscience for a physical object. Know your sweet spot and competitive advantage as you bring products to market. And please, please, please get some of the basics right on people, org, process, manufacturing, and operations. And I have to highlight this product. I call this productization. This is a secret of product management. Get this right, because you may have the smartest idea, you may have the smartest engineers, but for you to really make money and create value in the ecosystem, you need these people. And most importantly, hardware is super hard. I can tell you, before I got into hardware startups, I had a head full of hair, but alas, you know where I am right now. So thank you very much. All right, thank you, Sri, for your advice. And so people who are concerned about keeping the hairs, they should avoid hardware. So now we come to the Q&A sessions, and we have a question for Kurt. And anybody who has questions, please use the chat room and just post the questions there. So the question for Kurt is, thank you for your insight. Any advice for raising pre-angel funding to achieve the must-have you listed in your final slides?
So people, I mean, they look for their friends. I mean, networking is the most important thing in a startup company, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know. So, so I see people, keeping their normal jobs and working, after hours, building startup things and getting friends and family money. But networking, and if you can get people, if you can be, very excited about your product, about your technology, about your company, you can get other people excited, and you can convince sometimes people to give you money. So be persistent. I have companies that are still looking for angel investing, and they've been talking to me for 2 years, and they're persistent, and they keep at it. And if you have passion for your idea, get other people to share that same passion with you, and you'll get funding. That's the only thing I can recommend.
Yeah, I like to add to that.
Pete, yeah.
I'd like to add to that in that there are many other avenues. I think sweat equity, as Kurt mentioned, is a common one, but that right now there's a lot of government money, and so you can get a government grant. You can leverage technology from a university. You can license things from a major company that they're not using. And don't think that you have to build everything yourself. Because if you think you have to build everything yourself, you're going to fail, right? If there's something out there, whether it's a piece of software or a piece, of course, you got to validate it and you got to integrate it. I like Sridhar's comments on having the software stream and the hardware stream come together. But there are many ways to raise money. But at the end of the day, you got to sell the dream that you have, whether it's to your friends or to an investor. You got to sell the dream, and you have to show that there's a market for it, that there's pain in the market, and that you're going to solve that pain in a unique way. And if you can do that, people will give you money.
And by the way, the government money, I mean, even if it's only a small amount, is a huge validation to angel investors. So if you have an NIH grant or a NSF grant, it's a huge validation.
And Sri, you have any additional feedback?
Oh, I was looking at the questions, on, specific to my presentation. I apologize. I just lost track of your conversation because I was reading the questions. So I'll pass on this round.
Okay, so I'll add a little bit. This SBIR, which is a small business organization of the government, they have lots of grants. They also have grants through National Science Foundation. Those are actually dilution-free money, so they actually do not take away any equity versus other investors who usually have to trade off a portion of your equity of the company for the money they invest. And don't assume it's going to take a long time, because I thought that usually takes a year or more, but the portfolio company in Lab 360 actually was able to get a $250,000 NSF grant in 6 months. because the founder knew exactly what he was doing in terms of applying for the grants, and he was able to get that money. And also, like Kurt's point, it's a validation. It's yet another independent organization. So a lot of these grants, they're filling out the application. It's not easy. It takes a few days actually just to for you to think it through to fill it out. But it is another source of funding source when you are in the pre-revenue, pre-seed mode. The other question actually is for Pete. Thank you for your talk. Would your company also help startup to raise fund? And how?
So there's several ways. We have a whole training curriculum, and a good portion of that is help startups prepare their pitches to VCs. So we go through their slides, we make sure they have a clear value proposition, a clear financial depiction, a clear market analysis. And so we put a lot of energy into their venture, the pitches that they're going to give to angels and venture capitalists. Second, we have close to 300 investors in our network, which includes individual angels, angel groups, corporate VC like Intel Cap, Hynix Cap, Samsung Cap, but also a lot of major VCs like Eclipse, Playground, NEA, Venrock, Walden. And so we make the introductions into the VCs through people that have invested and do invest in semiconductor and are part of our network. But we also have our angel group, which has made 5 investments this year. So Sri and Kurt, you should join our angel group, okay? You too, Joseph.
All right, sure. So I missed earlier question, actually it's for Sri, because the question is about, can you comment on voice interaction for wearables and other IoT devices, Sri?
Yeah, I mean, that was a question I was looking, and I wanted to get my thoughts to answer to Emily. So Emily, I think that's a fantastic question. First of all, I want to highlight something, voice is mostly communal. It's not personal in most of the devices. So any one of us, we could walk around, and I'm not going to scream the word. We can say, Alexa, and it's going to respond. So the thing here is, when voice is communal and it's not personal, it's not like you're logging into a device with your username and password. So think of how to make it more personal. Even with voice recognition, it's super hard. So that's number one. The second thing is voice on its own sometimes is not very fulfilling. And let me give you an example. Let's say you do a search on a specific topic on building hardware products on a Google search. You'll get a plethora of options, like 8 options or like 20 options. But on like a voice-based speaker, if you have to ask the same question, by the time it does a search and gets like the 4th or 5th option, you have forgotten what the first option is. So voice on its own is inadequate. Voice along with a touch interface actually makes it a richer experience. So think of those areas where when you're working with voice, you can enhance the experience with haptics as such. That's the second one. 3 is voice are inhibited by social norms. I lived in Europe for quite some time. And I don't know how many of you have noticed this, like 10, 15 years ago, in Europe, people would take their phones. It would be like hidden in their jackets. You walk into the US, you have people with phones like hanging from their belt clips, right? I mean, it's vastly different. So with voice, it's sometimes very hard. Let's say you have company in your home, you're not going to scream at your speaker when you have a lot of people, entertaining people at your home, to ask a question. So you have to be very sensitive about what works in a specific geography may not work in another geography. So sensitive about social norms. So product management, anyone who's designing the product features for a voice-based device has to be super sensitive about some of those aspects. So designing voice, especially for wearables, is a super interesting space. And if you want more details on that, hit me up later and I can walk you through the swampy deltas so that it doesn't become your Vietnam.
Okay, thank you.
A really quick
And-
add to that, if you don't mind, Joseph, really enjoyed your,
Sure.
your comments, Sri, is take a look at your, especially the chip folks, take a look at your customer's customer, okay? Because your product is going into a system, the system's gonna be sold to someone else, okay? So take a look at the pain of your customer's customer. And everything that Sri said was very applicable to that. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. And Kurt, no, you're muted. Kurt,
I
you
don't have any comments on that, Joseph.
Yeah. Yeah. So how are you doing on time? I know you have another event coming up.
I have another 10 minutes or so.
Okay. So the next question, it's regarding the $2 billion venture fund that was announced by Amazon. So tips for aspiring entrepreneurs. Bezos hates PowerPoints. So how do you get to get to that the venture fund? So Sri, since your company just raised $200 million, I mean,
well, you know, about the Amazon culture that, you know, I absolutely admire is you get to write. For those of you who have interacted with people in Amazon or companies that have emulated the Amazon culture, there's a lot of writing that happens. So the first 30 minutes of any meeting is basically, you know, reading a paper. You know, it's like silent, everybody reads, and then they respond. So it's not exactly PowerPoint. So, you know, putting your thoughts on paper would be the first step. So there may not be a pitch deck, you know, there may be a pitch document that you may want to start with, which is number one. Second, I think that question was, you know, alluding to Morning Brew, you know, absolutely. And Morning Brew, I read the same newsletter from Morning Brew, and it alluded to the rise of e-commerce and the impact on the sustainability, right? If you actually, you know, Amazon published their sustainability report and they didn't hit their targets. So this sounded, the way this was written on Morning Brew was, hey, you know what, we missed the target. And by the way, there is a $2 billion fund to take care of, you know, my carbon karma at this point in time. So my perspective here is, look, I think Amazon has done a phenomenal job by putting money aside for sustainability. And I'm positive if you're following the methodology of what makes people get into Amazon and be successful at Amazon, if you just follow those principles, I think that would be your first step.
Okay, thank you. So this is kind of a follow-up question for Pete. So the question is about whether Silicon Catalyst is interested in funding solar startups, specifically ones that works on a flexible solar technology for energy harvesting in IoT devices and wearables.
So we have taken a look at several software startups. So there's two parts to my answer. We typically only consider companies for incubation that are building somewhere around a custom chip. Now, we've had a couple of companies approach us that are building a fairly advanced system with the future goal of a custom chip, and we have considered those. In solar, we've considered companies that are doing new and more advanced ways of turning the light into energy or turning the DC into AC. We have been discussing with Applied Materials and TEL and SUNY in New York about extending incubation to special materials. I see there's another question that talks about silicon nitride, silicon carbide, gallium arsenide, et cetera. So we've been discussing about extending our incubator to that. So far, we've only accepted one company in that area. So I guess the answer is yes, but I want to be guarded that it hasn't been our primary focus, but we are considering extending.
Mm-hmm. So thank you very much, Pete. Since Kurt has a few minutes left, so maybe I jump over to the question for Kurt. For startup chip company, initial 2 years, for startup company, initial 2 years normally focus on the chip technology development, could they look into funding operation and marketing expertise a little later after the technology is validated?
I don't think so. I think you need to really look, I mean, marketing and operations need to be upfront. I mean, you need to understand the market before you can build the right product. So I think, you know, marketing and who you're going to sell to and what the, you know, all the aspects of that the customer interacts with your product. I mean, that's all part of marketing, and that needs to be up front and center in the very beginning. I think oftentimes companies that start off with just a technology, oh, we have this great technology idea, those are the ones that are most likely to fail, in my view. So because you know, to make a company successful, you have to connect with your customer, and that means marketing. As far as operations, you know, sometimes, you know, you could be a little bit flexible in terms of operations. You might start off with one foundry, for instance, if you're a chip company, or you might start off with a development foundry. But you have to really weigh, if you start off with one foundry that's maybe not top tier, maybe it's a third tier foundry, and then you become successful and you have to migrate to another foundry, sometimes that can be expensive. So, but at the same time, I mean, a lot of companies do that. Most MEMS companies do start at a very small foundry and then migrate to a tier one foundry. So operations, you can maybe look a little bit later, but marketing, I don't think you can.
So let me add a little bit more to that. From a components level, I think sometimes you can look at from a technology migration standpoint, what better technology is coming. Like for example, today we're already rolling out some of the 5G when 4G is not, so well established in every part of the world. But on the device side, I think it's absolutely you need to understand from a consumer person perspective why they would purchase your device and how they're going to use it. Having a better mousetrap and there's not sufficient mouse, ultimately the business model is not going to work.
Right.
Yeah. Sri, anything you want to add?
No.
Oh, sorry, Pete, actually. Pete, the second catalyst, yeah, there's more second question.
So, yeah, I agree with Kurt. I think you have to understand the market before you even start, okay? And you understand the customer's pain. And this is a difficult thing for folks. I think the Stanford group with the NSF, the ICOR program is very good for junior entrepreneurs, where you have to talk to 100 customers before you put together your business plan. But I'll give you an example. I was at a company reviewing a proposal where they were building telecommunications products, and this is quite a few years back, but they were trying to decide between 0.35 micron and 0.18 micron. And the R&D person was saying, you know, 0.35, this is pad limited. It'll be less expensive for the mask. It'll be less expensive for the wafers. Mm-hmm. It'll be quicker to get through. We should build it in 0.35. And I asked them to dig deep into the marketing because they were more of an engineering-led company, even though they had real revenue. And what they found out was that the customer really wanted chips that were cool because they were putting them into these neighborhood boxes for telecom. And if they got hot, it would break, and then they had to go do a service call. And that was much more important to them than paying a few more cents for the wafer, for the chips. And so going to 180 nanometer was a lower voltage than 350 nanometer. And so that was the right decision. So you're making a decision based on the customer's needs, not on what the technology is telling you. Great,
thanks. So I know, Kurt, you're about to have to go to the other event. Yeah, do you have any final advice?
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to take off, but I want to thank Wenbo.
Your final advice.
Oh, pardon me?
Final advice.
Yeah, your final advice.
Oh, sorry. So I mentioned this at some point, network. I mean, it's the more people you know, and the more people who are familiar with your technology and with you and your team. And it's just, you just have to you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you kiss Prince Charming, but that means kissing a lot of frogs. And I just want to encourage anybody that networking is almost everything. That's sort of I guess my last advice, Joseph. And thanks very much.
All right, thank you.
By the way.
Yeah, thank you very much for your insight and taking time to talk to this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Bye now.
Bye-bye. So that's another question for the panelists. How do you see the future with regards to cybersecurity?
Go ahead, Sri.
All right. Geez, look, tricks of the trade. Remember the word pain, P-A-I-N. P for get the basics right. First one, privacy. P for privacy. Make sure between every interface, it does not matter. In an IoT infrastructure, you're talking from the device to the cloud, from the cloud to the app. Doesn't matter. Every interface, look at privacy. The P part of pain, 256 AES. The second one is authentication for A, multi-factor, something that something that you have, and most of the devices that basically fall for security issues, they don't get the basics right. So the second one is authentication. I is for data integrity. Get the basic data integrity algorithms across the board, whether it's, SHA, MD message digest, get the standard integrity algorithms built in, and N is for non-repudiation. So first, get the basics of security, which is pain. The framework is pain, get that. Second, security should not be a Band-Aid. It's not an afterthought. It has to be incorporated through the dev process. You have DevOps, you look at DevSecOps. Absolutely do that. Three is get the trifecta for security. It's very simple. When I say the trifecta for security, do threat modeling, app scan, pen testing. Simple. Threat modeling, app scan, pen testing. If you were to get these three things that I mentioned, 99% of the times you'll be okay. Now, we are in the world of artificial intelligence. There are lots of attacks associated with AI, and even for those AI attacks, there are simple tools. And, hit me up later and I can walk you through some of the basic tools that are needed, especially if you're focusing on anomaly detection, you're using OpenCV or any other well-known frameworks. There are well-known attacks. Just get the basics right. And if you're building a consumer product in volumes, remember, before DEF CON happens, 45 days before, you'll have ethical hackers who are trying to break into your product and create a case study. Don't become a case study and get ahead of it. So long story short, there are certain basics on security. If you take care of the basics, and if there are exceptions, especially if you're imbuing AI, there are some tricks of the trade. And I'm happy to go through in details. If you guys connect with me either on LinkedIn or through IEEE, I'll be more than happy to walk you through some of the details. Pete, yours.
Yeah, at the system level that Sri covered, I think the only thing I would add is that have security in mind from the beginning. It's much better than trying to add it later on. At the chip level, we are seeing a plethora of security folks applying to the incubator. We accepted one last year that is basically received like $20 million from DARPA. So you can get much bigger checks from the government than SBIR today. But they say they're looking at the instructions before the processor executes them. And so they've got a couple of design wins and on ARM processors. They're also working on RISC-V. We've seen several that are trying to do all types of private keys and authentication solutions. At NXP, the authentication business was in my domain. So I shipped the solution to Apple and a couple of others in the marketplace. But I think security is incredibly important, and it's a moving target. You know, once you have something that's solid, the hackers are going to try to break it, and it's a moving target. But I agree strongly with the comments that Sri made about the system level. They have to look at the whole chain of where your data is moving, and you got to look, because they're going to attack the weakest link in that chain. So that's all I have to add.
Okay, great, thanks. So here's another question for Sri. It's about what's the role of the data in the world of IoT and machine learning?
All right, you know, data is the single source of truth, but knowing how to read the data is going to make or break your life. So let me put it this way. Again, you're talking about a connected product. And when you look at the connected product, you have data on people's phones, for example. You have data on the device that you have created. It could be a camera, it could be a robot. You have data in the cloud. And your ability to bring all that together in a meaningful way with a backend data bus is going to be so important. So when you're building a platform, you need to have the ability to ingest different forms of data. So you have a data ingestion part. And then once you get the data, you need to know how to cleanse the data, how to process the data. So data and enhance the data sometimes, you know, you like with weather information and things like that. So that's the next part. And then you have a data dispatcher, you know, you could be sending that stream of data to see patterns in the data, right? You know, it could be patterns in time, you know, you're talking about RNN, patterns in space, right? You know, CNN. And there is also another set of data that's not integrated in the product, which is consumer insights. Remember, you need to be able to like understand what is happening on the system and how consumers are reacting to that. You have to be able to munch that together. If you're building a great consumer products team, have a great consumer insights team. And most importantly, you need to have, sorry, I have dogs at home. So most importantly, you need to have a clear understanding of how the machine interacts with the humans, right? So it's just not consumer insights. You know, we had a program called Ghost where we would actually see, we would send, you know, go into people's homes and we would see how the machine interacts with the consumer environment, how the robots interacts with the consumer environment. So understand your sources of data, bring the data together with the data bus, and most importantly, read the data in the right way. How you interpret data is going to make or break your life. And again, you want details on this, you know, I can walk you through some of the, you know, the key steps and check boxes on data management. Thank you.
Oh, great. I don't know, Pete, you have anything to add?
No, that was good.
Okay, so from my perspective, actually adding to Sri's comment is data is a given. I think now with IoT, with sensing, and so the key thing is the quality of the data. We can always say garbage in, garbage out. So you got a bunch of data, but it's not accurate. It doesn't really do anything. I mean, so artificial intelligence and machine learning, pretty much I think that's a given going forward because we can, human just cannot keep up with the amount of continuous data coming in, especially through some of these IoT devices running 7/24. But again, if the data coming in are not accurate, are not really useful, no matter how good of your machine learning is going to do, it's still going to be very difficult. But on the other hand, I think the value going forward from today's, I think probably a couple years before, I think when Apple Watch first came out, is that they were not the first one to come out with the watch because they want to make sure the sensors in the Apple Watch can actually correctly collect the information so that they can actually provide good analysis or good recommendation how the user of the Apple Watch look at an alert so they can actually take a appropriate action to that alert. So that's my feedback to the group. Let's see, any other questions coming in?
There's the one about China.
And Yes, how to move your manufacturing away from China. I think both of you have experience in this area, and now add my my 2 cents worth afterwards. Go ahead, Pete.
So I would say, in terms of it, when you're building a chip, you know, we always looked at it. The first half is the die, and the second half is the assembly and test in the package. And so clearly, you can get great manufacturing without going to China. If you're on a leading node, you can use TSMC. If you're not on a leading node, you can use Global Foundries or TSMC. And there are other foundries, but those are as good as anybody. Well, TSMC is better than everybody, and now Samsung is becoming more active in the foundry business too. They just did a big announcement with Rescale, so you can get tier 1 or tier 2 foundry without going to China. Typically, for your package assembly and test, you would want to do the prototype locally, and then your high volume in China. But there are good suppliers in the U.S. like Flextronics. There's others in Japan like Sanmina, and you can always go to Taiwan, though they're more into the building the system versus assembly and test. If you get to world-class volumes, then you still need to probably go to ASC or somebody like that in China, though there are options in Thailand and Singapore and Malaysia. So I think from a chip standpoint, you're okay without having to move to China today. And at the point that it becomes a problem, that means you're shipping several $100 million, which would be a good problem to have. So, Sri.
Yeah, so 3 things to consider is the first one is what I call as fundamentals. Second, I'm going to say is shipping, because I really think that was one of the pain points that I wanted to highlight. And 3 is like geography specific idiosyncrasies, you know, which is cost and things like that. Getting into the fundamentals, you know, you got to make sure if you have a specific factory that you're working with China today, remember, they know that they're going to lose your business. So they are incentivized to move themselves out of China. So even a tier 3 factory, if you say, look, you know what, I can't be manufacturing here, tariffs are unbearable, you're shipping most to the US, and they will know someone, and there is a mechanism that's been established by, you know, a lot of factories in China to move out of China. So there's a service in China to move factories out of China. So that's already like, it's a well-oiled machinery. So that's number 1. But make sure your processes that have worked in China is the same in out of China. But again, geography-specific idiosyncrasies, you know, for Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia, the cost structures are different, and the cultures are different. For your ability to get your first pass yield to be like, you know, 99%, it's going to take slightly longer. So the first part is get the fundamentals right, you know, people, process, and factories, you know, get them to move. The second one is understand shipping implications on how long is it going to take for you to like ship from outside of China. I've known scenarios where people in Vietnam and in Thailand, they've had shipping issues and booking containers. So if you are in a consumer product, your ability to get unset products in retailers, if you're shipping from outside of China, understand those idiosyncrasies. And of course, is cost. You know, your tariff could be, I don't know, 20, 25%. And your cost to manufacture the product in Thailand or Vietnam could be 15% more than China. So understand the true benefit of moving outside of China before itself. So those are the 3 things that I can highlight.
So I'd like to add a little bit more in terms of, you know, startup actually just starting up. A lot of times I think they are under the impression they have to get to the profit margin that they have to hit at the volume level, and they went to China for manufacturing. But really, I would encourage a lot of people to look at is the entire total product lifetime cost. So there's a lot of soft costs that people don't realize in terms of dealing with China. They're 15 hours ahead of us. So after 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, daily conference call, weekly conference call. What does that take away from your engineers or your production people working with local vendors? I mean, these are not factoring into your gross margin of the product. Shipping, even packaging. How do you fill a container worth of, so packaging come into consideration. Because a lot of times, because of the marketing aspect of putting on the shelf for Best Buy and Target, you want certain size packaging, but you don't really need to be that big of a package. So there's a lot of all these details that a lot of the startups don't really understand. I think that's where sometimes that when we say hardware is hard, because there's a lot of these type of factors that has nothing to do with software, that you don't have to look at the number of bits you can actually put in. And usually in the embedded software, you still have to be concerned how big is your software code. But most of the other mobile apps and cloud application, there's no real hard line about how small your software code has to be, right? And then the quality and the reliability. So a lot of times you look at the BOM cost of coming back from the vendor, but what kind of guarantee yield rate? What kind of reliability rate? Because if they can only produce 90%, and that also goes into chip, so you have to ask these questions: what kind of yield rate? Because they can hit the cost, but if they only get 60-70% yield rate, that means you have to pump up the total forecast in order to meet your 100% of your forecast because of the potential failure fallout from the yield rates. So those are the types of things I think some of the consideration you have to and that's where I'll plug into Pete's accelerator. I mean, so if you join some of these accelerators like Pete's Silicon Catalyst, specializing in semiconductor, or hardware accelerator from the various local in San Francisco Bay Area, that's what you can learn a lot from the mentor network and the partners within those accelerators, because they have a lot of this experience in this area to help hardware startups to get started. So I think right now we are running right on time, 1:30, and this recording, this webinar will be recorded. I think Sri shared his Twitter handle, and then Pete also shared his email address at pete@sicatalyst.com. And if other people want to get in touch with Kurt, you can also send him a LinkedIn request. And if there's no additional question at this point, I'd like to conclude this webinar, and I'd like to thank you, all the speakers, for sharing their insights and their knowledge with the group. And I look forward to a follow-up event so that we have more interaction with the hardware communities. This is a webinar, so it's likely all over the world. It's not just in the Bay Area. So thanks again, Sri. Thanks again, Pete. And thank you also for Wimbo for organizing and hosting this event. Have a great one. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.